You will hear today all that you need in order to understand the purpose of the enemy. There is little you can do other than to resist, with hope or without it. But you do not stand alone. You will learn that your trouble is just part of the trouble of all of the Western world. But what shall we do with the ring? That is the doom we must deem. I say, though, I have not called you to me, strangers from distant lands. You have come here and are met in this very nick of time by chance, as it may seem. Yet it is not so. Believe rather that it is so ordered that we who sit here, and none others, must now find counsel for the peril of the world. Things shall be openly spoken that have been hidden from all but few until this day. And first, so that we may all understand what is the peril, the tale of the ring shall be told, from beginning to end. And I will begin that tale, though others shall end it. Hey folks, and welcome to a daily rating special. On today's show, we'll be sitting down with Vincent Daly to get his thoughts on The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King, all directed by Peter Jackson. And don't worry, there's no spoilers. We'll even take some time to discuss the special extended versions of the films to see what's added or lost if you choose to or not to watch the extra content. It's going to be a great show, so stay tuned and enjoy. The man of the hour now, Mr. Vincent Daly. How we doing, buddy?
Tommy boy, how's it going?
It's going okay for me. This is a big day. A big day for the daily ratings.
Oh, yeah.
Big day for me personally.
Absolutely. Folks, Tom is one of the biggest Lord of the Rings fans I know. And honestly, I mean, this is huge. We were kind of always looking for an excuse to, or rather, when we would cover the Lord of the Rings.
It was only a matter of time.
Yeah, and I think the best we're going to get is this Rings of Power release, which, despite some early talk, some early thoughts on it, I mean, the core trilogy here is really where your attention should be as a new fan, as an old fan, revisiting for the extended, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, the success and the execution of these films are the reason why we even have the Rings of Power.
True, absolutely.
You know, maybe it would have been attempted again, the Lord of the Rings or some such, I don't know. But the films were so pivotal, you start here kind of deal.
Oh, yeah,
I don't know how you, I mean, the Hobbits, listen, I mean, you could throw them in the trash, in my opinion.
Yeah. Actually, a lot of my notes, I tried to stay away from the low-hanging fruit of comparing to the Hobbit.
It's a good idea. It's a good idea.
Just because it's so much. I mean, these films just kind of sweep over them so easily, you know.
And they mean so much more here, these films, than anything that came after. The making of it, what went behind them, the inception of it, and just execution all around. Like every single way. This is the best representation of what we have.
And there's so much content here as well. You know, even the premise of this type of episode, that you have the normal trilogy and then you have the extended, that these films kind of take on an entirely new face with the extended content.
Big time. I'm so excited to talk about the extended too. And folks, how this is kind of, Vin's going to give his review the theatrical versions.
My usual
because
song and dance.
Right. Well, because that's what's important to cover that, and then we'll step into a little bit of the extended and try to stay away, of course, as spoilers as much as possible, as we always do. But really, because this isn't a director's cut or an extended edition of a film, really like anything else. One, because they go hand in hand, all three.
Sure.
And two, because all three are typically way more of an extended version that you ever get, especially on where a director's cut is usually, they brag about 8 minutes of extra footage or something like that.
Right.
It's a whole different ballpark here.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, going over some numbers, Fellowship is just under 3 hours, extended is 3 hours 30. Two Towers is just under 3 hours, extended is 3 hours 43. And then Return of the King is 3 hours 20, and then extended is all the way to the big boy number, 4 hours and 11 minutes.
Absolutely.
I mean, when the hype of Snyder Cut for Justice League was coming out, I'd be like, I've actually been there, done that.
Yeah, seriously.
It was Return of the King.
Or Scorsese's The Irishman, too.
Sure, yeah.
We've definitely been there, done that.
Yeah.
Decent amount of credits to that. I think our numbers both match, by the way.
Oh, okay.
I saw like 3 different, I saw so many people getting the numbers wrong online.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, we have the same thing.
Good.
So it's a lot of extra content, so we're excited to cover that and everything like that. But why don't we start? Do you want to do any backstory or jump right into it?
I think some of what I want to cover before tackling these three is definitely around just the production of the films themselves.
Oh, sure,
all these films were made at the same time, and honestly, there is a lot of overlapping praise for that reason. We look at actually the critical nominations, the critical awards as far as the Oscars for these, and there's a common thread that I think highlights the advantage of all of these films being made at the same time. Fellowship wins. It wins Best Cinematography, Best Makeup, Best Score, Best VFX. Two Towers is at a low, with only winning 2 for Best Sound Editing and Best VFX. And then Return of the King really swept through that year. I mean, it's impressive how much it swept through. Best Director, Best Picture, Best Writing, Best Art Direction, Best Costume, Best Makeup, Best Score, Best Sound Mixing, and once again, Best VFX. I think the common thread there, that visual effects are why you want to watch this trilogy, still stands up today, and that I'll try to limit it, but that is not a factor that we find in the Hobbit trilogy.
No, certainly not, and honestly, movies just now.
Right.
I mean, Lord of the Rings, I would say, is really some of the big films that took advantage of special effects. First of all, they did unbelievable jobs with real effects.
Yep.
They were pivotal in it, and then it just kind of went away. Just didn't really see it, especially maybe after 2010 or something like that. I was just going to say, too, you made the comment of just like, it's impressive about all the Oscar wins on that third. It's more than impressive. It's record-breaking or record-tying, I believe.
Wow.
I believe it was nominated for 14 and won 11 or something like that.
Yeah, 11 stands out, yep.
And that's the same as something like, I don't know, it was Titanic or something.
Sure,
another big one. But I think it still holds that as most or tied with most that won.
It's just, wow. I mean, it's a good sign going into this trilogy, like just very, very fundamentally.
I think one of the last years of the Oscars really too, that where it was the biggest, most talked about, incredible movie held up to it in the Oscars as well.
Right.
Like as far as financially it made and everything like that. You look at Avatar, won a bunch of money, didn't do anything in the Oscars.
Sure.
And you could say that for all the Marvel stuff and all the acting in the Marvel movies and stuff like that, what we get post 2005, 2010.
I think that's a great point. Yeah, because the Oscars now are known for giving it to the little guy, the minority, or even just like the art house production. And
so for some reason that's good. For some reason, that's bad. And for some reason, I think it's a good representation where big, huge blockbusters actually really were good movies.
Exactly.
Where now, it's tough to get. It's very tough to get. I think back about the time that these films were made. Everything about it worked in its favor, kind of.
Absolutely.
Where we were with tech and where we were with still storytelling kind of deal.
Yeah.
Because it was before digital age as far as people being online. I remember Matt Damon had said this best, actually. And he said back in the day, half of the money that a company made on a film, half of it was from DVD or VHS or rentals. He goes, so when that went away, all your money came from people in the theater. It changed everything because everything was just, let's just get people in the seats. Let's get people in the seats. And that's why Marvel will continue to do Marvel and Fast and Furious and everything like that, because the fact is, they're not making money anywhere else. How do we appease to the biggest audience?
Absolutely.
A lot of why we also get your complaint of why isn't this rated R? Because they're trying to make every single penny they can in the seats.
Very true. Very true. Yeah, my comment, my comment thread of almost every review I have. Yeah, but I think with that said, there's like I said, there's a lot of overlap here. I think VFX, surprisingly, for a movie that is now, getting to 20 years old, or trilogies, they're getting to 20 years old, these are still holding up to that capacity. And I think a lot of my universal praise for these three are that, Jackson and team, his use of bigatures, his use of practical effects. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's definitely some dated CGI in this, especially in Fellowship, because it's before they really introduced Gollum as a main character with the mocap technology and everything like that. But across the board, it's a lot of impressive visual effects, and I think that thread really holds true to today. Also, again, because of these big epics, if you notice in my reviews, folks, I'm not going to get too deep into the story itself discussion. I'm going to be leaning on, you, Tom, for the extended what's worth it,
right?
What's kind of the deep dive there. For me, because we're avoiding spoilers, I can't really take my knife out and dissect it, so deeply, because if anything, to the credit of this film, it holds true to getting the ring to Mount Doom, for the entire three.
Right.
And that as a through line. So I think there is some simplicity to that, and not going to really be my focus in reviewing these films.
And I think that's also what we are right now. With the daily ratings is you come for us, we have bite-sized pieces, and this is, here's the rating, okay, and here's a quick reason why.
Sure.
God knows that we could literally make our own podcasts just discussing Lord of the Rings, let alone podcasts that go into an hour on this or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe that could be fun things we do in the future, a secondary podcast or secondary kind of specials where they will be spoiler ridden. We can sit down and talk about films in depth. But, I love that this is kind of how we do things right now.
Exactly.
And 10, 15, 20 years from now, people can go on this site. Lord of the Rings got this. Oh, let's just listen to the quick 10-minute review, and here we go.
Exactly. So, finally, before we get cracking into it, Tom, can we get our best pronunciation of Mordor?
No, I'm not.
You're not doing you're the Lord of the Rings
I only
guy.
call it Mordor.
Mordor.
Well, I guess everybody has a different
Give me
line.
one. Give me
I'm trying
one.
to think. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Everyone says Mordor.
Yeah, Mordor. No, or Mordor. Something like that. There's something in before the R, kind of. Mordor. No, that's way too much. It's way too much. I don't even know.
That was my enjoyment of everyone pronouncing this throughout the entire trilogy.
Really? That caught your ear.
Yeah, it's just I was like, wow, that is great. So I'll bounce back between these two, and I'll see if I'll be the Tolkien pronunciation of this.
All right, so we're going to go back. I guess we're ready to go.
Oh, yeah,
we could talk all the time. And Tolkien, anyway, everyone, the books came out in the 50s, yada, yada, but we don't have to spend too much time. We'll get started here right away. So we're going back in 2001, so 21 years ago. Fellowship turns 21, basically, this year. 2001, this is The Fellowship of the Ring, of course, directed by Peter Jackson. And Vin, what do we get? So,
possibly, really, and I kid you not, folks, possibly one of the best openings to a film I have seen. And it is just such a tone setter to get us in the mood for fantasy. It sets the stage perfectly for what the greater world is and how our characters are tiny pieces in that. I would also say it sets the direction for the epic. Without this, the opening of Fellowship of the Ring, particularly how much huge amount of time we spend in the Shire, might feel a little bit directionless. It might feel like, okay, where are we going with this? And I think it sets the larger picture and definitely sets the gravity of when the ring is introduced in the Shire. We know what it maybe entails, and that's really brought home as well in the performances of Bilbo, of Gandalf, to find out, wow, this is a Herculean task to try to get rid of this thing. And I think that it all lies in that opening of just how we're introduced to it. It really is just like such a phenomenal opener. I would say, the ultimate way to open up a fantasy movie. It gets us in the mood for fantasy, which I think is easier said than done. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's impressive too, just because, in Lord of the Rings, people are a little bit more familiar maybe with the show too, because it's been just talked about more. This is taking place at the end of the Third Age.
Yep.
So we know that there's been 3 ages, and they have been thousands of years each, kind of. And a very short amount of time in the beginning, they really catch us up and just like, all right, here's like the gist, and you kind of get a feel for what's going on in the world, basically, and then brings you into it. It's impressive for how quickly we actually feel comfortable with where we're at.
Yeah.
We're not spending too long on something where you're just like, okay, and they're also getting the job done, so we're not completely clueless of what the hell's going on.
Absolutely. And I'll say it probably, a handful more times with this first one. It's about the rising action. So, you could say something is similarly achieved with a Star Wars crawl or some sort of exposition in the beginning, but there's something different about this exposition in the beginning of Fellowship. The narration, the visuals, it gets us. It gets us quickly in the mood for the story that's going to be told. It's a little bit
really
different than
does.
just catching us up with the story beats themselves.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah. It's enjoyable to watch, and you're engaged in it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Exactly.
And it looks great.
Yeah, for sure. Moving through the praise, it is 10 out of 10 casting. I mean it. It is perfect casting.
Even for Frodo.
We'll get into my thoughts on the Little Hobbits, but you always hear about these stories in Hollywood, how some actors almost got a role or turned down the role, and I think there's a lot of that with this trilogy in particular. Maybe it's just osmosis of things that you've told me over the years, Tom, that
Right.
I've heard a lot of these around this trilogy specifically, and maybe that's just for how big the roles are, in general for these characters. But here it feels like everyone understands the gravity of the role they play, and I really mean it. I mean, it is stellar casting. I cannot give enough praise to these characters feel exactly like they should be in that role, and I almost can't see a different actor playing it or actress playing it when it comes to a lot of these. And there's a lot of that talk, but for me, I think it was a huge plus watching this again.
I could almost see Jake Gyllenhaal audition to be Frodo.
Oh, really?
And he's got the same eyes and kind of face structure as Elijah, so I can easily see him in that place. I think I would be more annoyed. Where, as funny as it is with Elijah Wood, maybe isn't the best at Frodo, and yet even the nerdiest of nerdy is especially Tolkien lore fans.
Yeah.
We all you really like Elijah Wood. You don't really love the accent at times. You don't love the performance, but you truly do still love him for whatever reason.
Absolutely.
But I think absolutely with the casting.
Yeah, and 100% that goes towards Gandalf, played by Ian McKellen. He is so amazing in this. I think it's kind of a 3-part dance. It is the camera work that is paired with his performance and musical cues. It really just makes for perfect character moments. Every scene with him is golden. I don't think it's in the Fellowship. I don't think there is a single scene that Gandalf is in it, whether he's the focus of it or not, that I wasn't just gripped by the performance. Because again, there's something to him subtly knowing much more than we know at the story.
Right.
There's such gravity to the fact that he won't even touch the ring. You know what I mean? He knows what would happen if someone of his power level would get involved with this. And again, it's the camera work, it's the subtleties of his acting on the small moments he has with the camera, his face,
I was going to say
his emotions.
We have talked about his face before, and what's captured in his little moments and
Yeah.
everything like that, or just those little tiny twitches or something in his eyes as well.
Yeah.
They make a big difference in those scenes.
Oh yeah, and I think
They make it believable.
for sure.
It almost, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's weird.
And it creates a humanity in one of the most powerful characters in Middle Earth. It creates a connection we have to someone that actually knows the gravity of the situation, where Fellowship is so much about doubting the gravity of the situation.
Yes, yeah.
In story. And I'm not even talking about like the big moments of the film. I'm not talking about like, the you shall not pass. My praise is in those quiet close-ups, the calculating private thoughts, McKellen's performance. It sells it all. And before anything starts, his face shows that he knows what it'll take to get the ring to Mordor. That's the last one. I'll just do
keep
Mordor.
doing it. Keep doing it multiple times.
I thought you were going to be about Mordor.
I know what you mean, especially Elrond has some great ones.
Yeah,
the way he
he's
says
got
it,
some great ones.
I've never personally tried it before. I've never been asked to before.
And I'm not. And you're supposed to be the Lord of the Rings fan. You actually, it's not really directly in my notes, but Elrond's casting as well. Hugo Weaving, amazing here.
One of those wasn't supposed to be him.
Yeah, one of those performances as well, where you're like, where is this guy in acting? Like, why isn't he in more stuff?
I know.
He's so cool.
It's absurd.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was supposed to be Sam Neill.
Yep.
But turned it down to do Jurassic Park 3.
Which JP3, boy, was that a
Shocking.
wrong call? Yeah.
But then you think about the size of the role. Mm-hmm. I mean, Elrond's much less screen time than the Jurassic Park. But
yeah.
That's another thing. I can see him as Elrond. But boy, I don't think he'd play it as well as Hugo Weaving.
And even by his age then, too. I mean,
Hugo
has he brings kind of an elegance to the elfness of it, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think we could do a whole podcast on the design of each of the races in Middle-earth, how in the steel, how in the armor, how in the architecture, it's all follow through on the ideas of the culture, and without a big block of exposition of what these people are about, where we understand it just by the sight of it. Yeah.
And just to note on costumes too, the way they age things or make things look aged or worn or new, something we don't get a lot, don't do it as well anymore. That's for sure.
Yep.
It's just like makes it more believable. I always say with Lord of the Rings, there's a gritty realism to it. You know what I mean? Where Tolkien pretended like this actually happened.
Oh, yes.
So
from his language crafting to,
Right, and he would say that today, that we would be in the 7th age.
Yes, yeah.
Which is cool, but it's just like he really meant it to be a real-life thing almost. And the way that Peter Jackson brings it to life, I mean, you give this to Del Toro or something like that.
Continuing the hate on Del Toro.
But that gritty realism is there throughout.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have some notes on why that illusion is never broken, but it really is the key is that it takes itself with a certain gravitas. It takes itself with a certain seriousness.
Yeah.
It's never broken. There's certainly comedy, especially in this first one. It's probably the lightheartedest of all of them, especially for the time that we spend in the Shire and with other hobbits. Yeah. But even in that, there's a genuineness. The illusion is never broken, and we'll definitely return to that note. I think why this is my favorite of the three is structurally we have the rise of the Fellowship. It is the rising action. I think in other films, we always, in the sequels, we always have them trying to come back together in some way, and it never quite feels the same. Here we have the Fellowship together, and all of our main crew, all of our main cast is right in one spot. It's also why, and we've discussed this before, even before the podcast, upon revisiting all the Star Wars, it's why I came away as a huge Star Wars fan, reinvigorated that New Hope, the first Star Wars, is the best of them, is because we have this rising action. We have the initial hook that gets us interested in everything, and I think here, again, I come out strong out of the gate with Fellowship of the Ring as really the best of it because it sells us on the idea first and foremost, and we get to enjoy that time of them all together.
I would say also for you, because you were such a fan of world building is too.
Yeah.
And with this, there just naturally needs to be a ton of world building to get us all kind of up to speed and know what the hell's going on too, which helps. Well, you gave away the big thing too. This is your favorite one.
Listen, I got no bones about it. This is going to be my favorite of the three. Not that any of these films are bad whatsoever. And again, I go back to some of those pre-notes that so much is shared. So much of my praise in this one and for these two sequels.
Right.
They're honestly at the same benchmark. If anything, very slightly different things, even that I will be critical about are more so it's not that they're new to the new to the trilogy, or new to the movies. If anything, they're just more pronounced.
Right.
Where
sure.
I feel like the balancing act is just so perfect in this first film. I gotta say, I love the stakes here, and this is praised specifically towards Fellowship. One of the most well-crafted scenes is an early conflict we have with the hobbits and the Nazgul, or a Nazgul. And there are no swords drawn. There is no hope for Frodo and crew if they get caught. The tension in this scene is just incredible. And I feel like where this relates to stakes, there was no better time in this trilogy that we see the balance of the ring really having true stakes, that if it falls into the hands of the Nazgul, the hands of the forces of evil, it's all over. You know what I mean?
It's done, yeah.
And I feel like it just shows such range for Peter Jackson as a director to have a scene like this almost right away after we get those really uplifting comedy upbeat
Right, as soon as we get out of the Shire kind of deal, yeah.
And man, I mean, when I was younger, maybe looked at that scene, and it was filler to get to the meat of when we're getting the Fellowship together.
Mm-hmm.
I look at that scene now, and knowing what I like in a film, and knowing what it takes to have range in a movie, and I think it might be my favorite sequence in the whole trilogy, as crazy as that sounds.
It does sound. Yes, it is crazy, but
I know it is not Helm's Deep, not Miss Tirith, but it's just that there's such incredible stakes to Frodo and crew. Really,
and it's felt through the screen to you.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that you were sitting there enjoying that so much,
Absolutely.
or picking up on it that much. Yeah.
Yeah. It's before they have anyone supporting them, and it's so real. And again, it's also a scene that doesn't really feel like any other scene in the trilogy as well. And that's where I really give credit to the range as Jackson as a director. It kind of comes out of left field, but is such a breath of fresh air before things even get started.
Right.
It's not
Yeah.
filler. It's definitely strategic to make sure that we're paying attention, because the stakes are real for these characters, even though we may not have the massive armies on screen or anything
Absolutely,
like that.
yeah.
Know? This is certainly high fantasy. I mean, there are elves, wizards, yada yada, rings of power, the whole nine. But my favorite aspect is how the magic is handled in this. It is so low flash. It is so toned back. This isn't just a wizard that went to a magic academy and now can conjure a fireball out of nothing. Instead, all the magic seems to interact with the world in some way. It seems to be conjured through not necessarily elements, but there's some sort of natural occurrence that is then just emphasized by the magic users in this world. And I think it's one of my favorite aspects, and definitely a perfect example of praise that I'm talking about it in Fellowship goes very equally across the entire trilogy.
I will say, yeah, and I think to that point with the magic is, Tolkien builds a very, very mystical and magical world. I mean, sometimes even stuff with like The Hobbit and everything like that,
Sure.
it can get pretty. It's like, okay, there's some like fantasy magic going on
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
And maybe it's a bit too much. And what I love about the films is Jackson just tones it down completely. And not completely. It's still there. We still understand that we're in a fantasy world. But it's just something where it's almost like adult fantasy.
Yeah,
where it's just like
yeah.
he gives us tastes of it. We understand that, elves can do things men can't. Hobbits are a certain thing. Gandalf can do certain things that no one else really can too. We have this magical ring.
Yep.
And yet it's all tastefully done and very adult-ish in a way.
Yeah.
So to your point, it's just the way it comes across is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even in the and especially in Fellowship, we get some upper limits of what magic is shown on screen. And again, I can't stress enough, you kind of are obligated to call this high fantasy because of the magical races and I mean everything. I mean, kind of Lord of the Rings.
Literally everything. Yeah.
Wrote the book on it, literally. You know what I mean? It kind of started it as really a fine-tuned genre, especially how we consume it in pop culture. But I can't stress enough, one of the more enjoyable parts is that there's the magic itself, the spells, if you will. These are, they truly feel like they are out of this world. They are not something that with enough time, with enough study, you can learn. It feels like it is something outer worldly. And I really just love that feel. One of my favorite aspects across the trilogy of all three. And again, a lot of that focus, once again, is on Gandalf. The way he is able to conduct it, from the elements around him. It's not just him just shooting a laser, shooting a lightning bolt or something like that.
Right. Oh, absolutely, yeah.
It's something that is, he just has a better understanding of the world around us, and that's how he uses it.
Right.
But I'll end with my notes on kind of gravitas. I think, for me, it is serious scenes matter. That is gravitas for me. The gravity of a situation, certainly can have comedy to it. Like I said, comedy is definitely in this. Gimli is almost exclusively a comedy character for the entire series.
Yeah.
I mean,
it gets worse and worse. But yes, right. He's most serious potentially in the first one. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially about like his hate of elves and whatnot.
Right.
Yeah. The comedy can be there, but I think the gravity of the plot never leaves being the most important piece, the most important time in these characters' lives, and it's always the priority. I think if I had to just boil it down, that gravitas is serious scenes matter, but also the serious scenes matter to our characters as well. It's not just that it matters for us. It matters to them, and that's why comedy isn't paired with it too often. The illusion is never broken, and I think that is the key for...
Great way to put it.
Why this trilogy works. I think back to The Hobbit, and, so many things... Whether it be the weird frame rate, whether it be the priority of 3D, whether it be just a bad stretched out story that should have been just 2 movies. The illusion is broken so often in those films, and that's nowhere near this trilogy. And again, I can't stress enough that there's a lot of praise going towards Fellowship here. I so much of it is shared, that praise is really, you can spread it across all 3 of these movies. So don't think that I'm just, falling in just for Fellowship. I think it is the best example, but so much of this is really overlapping with all 3 of these movies. With that said, the drum roll. We are going to give Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, an 85.
Oh!
Go watch it, folks. Go watch it.
All right. Very nice. Very nice.
It really is stellar. And honestly,
I'm shocked at the 85.
Yeah, it's just such a...
It's worth it.
It's such a fine-tuned movie. And again, more and more I watch it, I appreciate new aspects about it. I appreciate so much more of how well-balanced of a film it is. And it's something that I can't really say of the sequels. I mean, the sequels, again, just as great. And if anything, have all the aspects of this film, but there's just different priorities on what is kind of emphasized in the sequels, where with this, it's just this fine-tuned, fine-balanced piece of fantasy.
And how shocking that it's this long. I mean, it's the shortest one of the 3, but still a pretty damn long movie.
Oh, yeah.
And that it's like, this felt necessary type of deal.
Absolutely.
Wow. Absolutely. I love that it cracked. Obviously I love that. I mean, it's cracked into the must-watches. That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about the extended versions a little bit.
Sure.
I think the biggest way that I kind of want to talk about these is basically, is it worth it for you to watch the extended or not?
I love that.
These are unbelievably long extended versions, and they get longer as you go. And the biggest thing is, when you watch a director's cut, oftentimes you can see the scenes that they took out.
Right.
Even if you've never seen the original and you're just watching directors,
there's scenes that just to it.
Yeah, there's things that just don't make sense, that are almost seem like they were edited in. There's just, you can tell a lot of the times. And when you're dealing with something, so The Fellowship is for about 40 minutes extra content, around 30. No, that's not true. About 32 or 34 extra minutes. The thing is, that's a lot of extra time. It's a lot of extra time and a lot of extra scenes. And I have to say, when it comes to The Fellowship and the extended version here, you don't know. So if you were to watch
seamless,
if you were to watch the Fellowship extended version, it's 3.5 hours. By the end of it, it's pretty much like, okay, what was taken out, and what would you take out?
Yeah.
Some great things. You get a little bit more with maybe the Shire. I think there is wonderful world building and backstory with Aragorn.
Oh, yeah.
Which is awesome. And again, it's just like, God, you took this out, This is kind of big.
This is good stuff.
There's other things with some of the elves. And actually, there's one specific scene kind of earlier on as well that explains something that I just think is beautiful and so worth it. It's funny because I had watched this with the extended version with people that had never seen it before.
Okay.
And I almost wanted to be jumping in the movie before we got to a scene to set it up and explain it a bit. And then I didn't, and to find out that the extended version explained those
they
things.
cover the basis, yeah.
So just for the world building and for the continuation of a great story of the performances and just putting our foot even deeper into the water, I can't tell you enough how much, you would probably give the Fellowship a higher rating potentially.
Really?
Because even though this is half an hour extra of content, every single scene is almost worth it. And some of those are quite important too.
Yeah.
That just gets you deeper into the story. You care more about the characters. And you just know more of what's going on.
Yeah, more of that mood setting.
Because the world is huge, the story is huge, and a bunch of characters, a half an hour can be spread out a decent amount.
Yeah.
And I think with some of the building that goes on here and what's explained, you get in touch with what's going on a little bit more, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, and maybe the barrier to entry is much more palatable for people because it is only 30 minutes of extra runtime.
Exactly.
So,
Which,
maybe give it
again,
a shot. If you liked the more detail, guess what? You continue with the extended.
Sure. And in and of itself, I mean, 30 minutes extra is huge for any movie. I mean, it's almost not done. Like I said, 8-10 minutes, that's a lot for a lot of films that come out with a director's cut or extended.
Absolutely.
But for this, I mean, I would suggest just jump right, go ahead and do this.
Yeah.
And I think would be a lot of people that never actually sat down and maybe watched The Lord of the Rings.
That's exactly why we even pre-talking about this, why we wanted to do this.
People know they're long.
Yeah.
People are just like, oh my God, what? I mean, what is this? I don't care about this. So
or maybe they have a bad taste because of The Hobbit or something
like
that.
Sure, absolutely. So I would say, hey, if you really enjoy, I would say jump right into extended.
Sure, okay.
That's my thing. When it comes to the extended, Vin, when it comes to the theatrical version, there's no question, not with a shadow of a doubt, absolutely, this gets a full-on Tommy Two Shoes, two laces tied.
Two laces tied, the shoes are on. He's out the door.
First one we ever did. First time with two shoes that high.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah,
fantastic.
We've had two shoes, one laces tied. We've never had two shoes, both laces tied here.
Wow,
we've had a Tommy flip-flop before, all this. No.
There's a lot of variance in the grading score for Tommy Two Shoes.
But anyway, I would say that's my overall with the
well worth
Fellowship of the Extended.
I think that's great.
Yeah, I would even like to pick it apart you after the show more. Just like, this
Yeah.
wasn't in the... You kidding me?
Right,
You put this in. There's a beautiful scene here.
Yeah.
There's one scene in particular that's one of the most beautiful, in my opinion. And it's just great. It's just
And maybe
great.
that's most pivotal to kick things off because it is the start of everything. You know
Like
what
I said,
mean?
it's the world building.
Yeah.
Give us as much as possible because the way they do dialogue, it's so good. Just feed it to us through a tube. I love it.
Yeah, and there's going to be a compounding aspect of, with more appreciation, the more we can pick up on subtleties of like Gandalf in a moment.
Take something with Aragorn too. It's just like, this is a good scene to have in here.
Sure.
You know? It gets to the point where just like I feel bad for Peter Jackson having to cut stuff, leave stuff on the floor.
Yeah.
But with that, I'll tell you right now, we're gonna do 3 movies. We're running long today, folks.
Yeah, I'm looking at the timer and it's like, oh God,
I said
we're
earlier,
one down.
I said 10-minute reviews. Okay, we'll do our best to keep it under 20, and people are just got to deal with that.
We'll see.
But listen, let's jump ahead 1 year. As we know, these were filmed at the same time.
Yes.
And then for 2 months in between each film, they came back for reshoots. So it was really the original 18 months plus 2 months plus 2 months. But regardless, this came out in December 2002. This is The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. Vin, what do we get with the second installment?
Yes, so Two Towers, it is kind of the dreaded middle child of the series, with the Fellowship split apart by necessity. Structurally, we get a lot more individual stories with characters, which I think is a good and a bad thing. I would say my usual critique of sequels, or sequelitis, as I've referred to it as before, where we have to kind of rev the stakes back up, these films really don't have that problem. Again, there is a simplicity in a clear goal of getting the ring to Mount Doom, and I would say that is not, revving up the stakes is not the problem of Two Towers. The challenge is instead kind of keeping each mini group as interesting as the others. And I think just by the nature of them splitting them up, it kind of invites a comparison game of, I prefer this section of the movie more than the other. And I don't think that's something that Fellowship has to struggle with, and it's something that with the gang splitting up even more in Return of the King, once again, it invites that kind of comparison game that audience members are
interesting.
Going to have.
Yeah, no, I think naturally if you watch this more than once, you're going to come back to liking, even whether you think about it or not.
Sure.
Just naturally know that you're going to be liking, these guys, okay. Okay. This one, go to the bathroom here.
Right.
That type of deal. You're absolutely right.
Right, exactly. Where with a Fellowship, I mean, they're not all together all the time, but that rising action to get them all together, both the weak elements and the strong elements are able to smooth each other out. And I think that's once again kind of the brilliance of it. Also, welcome to the Gollum show, because this is one of the largest additions to the cast is actor, director Andy Serkis. The Gollum CGI mocap was revolutionary at the time, and I'm happy to say it still very much looks good after all the years. I will say it's
20 years.
Yeah, 20 years, and it's intense. This is not, simple CGI,
No.
They
and
put
it's not
him
quick, and like you said, it's not always dark or gritty. Like you always say, you always shoot at a dark or raining scenes.
You read my mind. My notes on lighting.
Gollum's there, baby. Smeagol's with us.
Yeah, in all elements, we get a sneak peek of him in the last film, but now he is a full blown character, and arguably, I mean, in our main piece of following with Frodo and Sam to Mount Doom, I think, regardless of maybe what I would say another 10 years out will do to my judgment of the CGI, I think what stands here is Serkis's performance, and that is what will be timeless. I mean, I don't really have an appreciation for the books or what Tolkien did with Gollum, but there is such a character transformation. I mean, I think, wow, did Serkis just really become this vile creature and just bake in so much into the performance of it.
So it's funny that you say that, because Gollum was going to be completely all CGI, just computer animated thing,
right,
basically.
Without the mocap.
Right. Basically, what happened was when Andy Serkis was doing the audition, he was contorting his face in order to get the character out. And he was just, the way he was contorting his body and changing his facial structure, they said, this guy is actually Gollum.
That's amazing.
And then that was when the mocap was born for Gollum. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. And talk about, I mean, what a wonderful choice it is. And you read my mind, Tom. It's surprising because it's really shown in all types of lighting.
Yeah,
what I mean?
Daytime, there's absolutely,
thankfully, story-wise, Gollum is kind of a creature that dwells in the dark, but, this lends to more favorable CGI at times, but all over these next two films, he's put in all types of lighting. And again, like I said in some of the pre-work or pre-notes of this, the VFX here is what the common thread of the critical praise is for this trilogy. It is so notable with Two Towers and as well Return of the King, because Gollum, I think, is the example of that. Are there moments that maybe it looks a little bit rough? Sure, but never immersion breaking, and certainly for someone that like myself that appreciates the making of films, I'm actually stunned by some of the scenes of how they're able to blend him into the environment so much, when he's picking up a rock, when he's working with reflections in water, just impressive stuff, really impressive
and
stuff.
I would say what's also interesting, because there's so much, a lot of times they're in landscapes or they're actually shooting outside, and a lot of the times, if they're working with bigatures or full life sets that they construct and carve. I would have to say, when you watch a modern day movie where everything is CGI, it just floods you with terribleness. Where if things look a little off with Gollum or here or there, everything else still looks good.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe you would think that would highlight him, but it doesn't, because we're still, your brain is still like, well, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not everything. You're not flooded with the horribleness everywhere. I'm thinking like 2 Justice League or something like that.
Sure.
How god awful every single piece of like practically scenery and everybody, and it was everything everything is just garbage to watch. Where this, it can still be beautiful set pieces, and even if Gollum's starting to age a little bit more after 20 years, it's really okay.
And that's where I stress. I mean, give another 10 years of this could fall into similar line of fire, like maybe some of the CGI in Hobbit or other type of films. But I think, again, what's going to stand out is Serkis's performance. You know, he really knocks it out of the park here.
And we'll take a note on that as far as how it's going to look in the future as well.
Yeah.
Because there's something we both haven't watched yet that came out a couple years ago. Basically, they took a fine-tooth comb to it in order for it to come out in full Dolby Atmos 4K.
Oh, really? Okay.
And Peter Jackson went through everything again.
Wow.
And revamped sound and visuals.
He pulled a Lucas.
So a lot of way different.
Okay.
But they fixed color. Like Fellowship has different coloring than Two Towers and Return of the King, everything like that. And they did go back even through some of the CGI stuff, and they said they clean it up a little bit.
Interesting.
And they modernize it. Scary word. Because modern CGI sucks. But from my understanding, and there's probably a bunch of people that did see it, and we just haven't yet.
Sure.
But I would love to get the best copy as possible, watch it, and see what we get.
And see what it does. And as long as they're not adding new things to it, a la Lucas, know, with I mean, just adding entirely new, musical segments,
But I just wanted to note that, because that might be an option for people to really, if you have the proper TV, the proper player and everything like that, might be the way to go.
Absolutely. So this film, I would say, has a lot going on with it. For some reason, the film has a lot of running shots.
Oh my God.
Everyone is just brisk jogging all the time in the film, and it's kind of hysterical. I don't, I would normally really bash something for maybe a filler shot like this, but it becomes a transition between sequences. Luckily, why I think I give this a pass, because I mean it really is. There's just so many they're just in a field, and Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn are just jogging. They're just jogging in full costume. I felt bad for them, but luckily we get a lot of gorgeous shots in the New Zealand landscape. This way, I mean, I think despite it maybe feeling like filler sometimes, this might be the best looking in utilizing these larger than life landscapes. I mean, these are big, sweeping, arcing shots. They're swinging around characters. I would say I can't hold back from calling this a transition or even filler at the worst, but at the same time, it falls into the same world building that I was praising the first one. Because
I like the idea, because there's so much with the whole movie, the whole thing's about traveling. I guess I like it that you get a sense of at least the scale of the thing. Yeah. It's not just we just go, boom, right down the road, we're here. Right. It gets a sense of just how much traveling, how much catching up, or how much, the vastness of the quote unquote Middle Earth is. That part is nice. I do agree with you, but there is a tinge of filler or transition.
Yeah. And maybe the goofiness of the jogging is just because it was always around our Dungeons and Dragons party of Gimli, Legolas, and Aragorn. They're
very
not
different
held
builds.
back. Yeah, they're not held back by the hobbits and maybe a larger party, a larger traveling group. But yeah, just funny. I would say, now that you understand that, these films are all pretty great as a baseline, and I can't stress that enough. The costumes, the scale, the gravitas, this is all spillover or overlapping praise I have for all these movies, and I think that is a product of making them all at once. For critiques, then, a lot of these movies have similar factors, but some are just more pronounced. Some are more just, embellished. I would say pacing is a big one here for maybe some of my critiques. That's also because we have so many parties splitting our time with, and it's not that I don't think these characters are important. If anything, I'm glad that we are spending our times with. I'm not saying, this is wasted time, because if anything, the silliest of the parties still have. I mean, especially in Two Towers, arguably have the most consequential result to the plot.
I mean, to that kind of point, it's almost like if you get rid of Fellowship and the trilogy starts with a Two Towers, and you have it, it's just it would work on its own. It does work, but because you said earlier how great it is when everyone's together.
Yeah. It smooths out the weak points. There's an average that happens.
Right, yeah,
where, with this now, you have the Ring Party, which is going to be Frodo, Sam, and Gollum. Like I said, jokingly, our kind of Dungeons & Dragons, our D&D party of Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. And finally, our idiot party, I'll call them, of Merry and Pippin. Naturally, there is, like I noted, there's going to be a comparison that is kind of forced on viewers of which group is your favorite. And let me tell you, it is not the other half of our hobbits. There's a reason why I called that the idiot party of Merry and Pippin. After Fellowship, Merry and Pippin just really take a nosedive for me in this series. It's never bad enough for me to hate the scenes that they're a part of. Again, if anything, their group is probably the most consequential to Two Towers and what they bring about, but it's honestly, it is the weakest of the split up here. My other frustration is that Frodo is just so logical in this. It's so frustrating. And believe me, Tolkien nerds, folks, the Hobbiton folks out there, I understand 100% it is the Ring's influence, but man, is he just a frustrating lead to the story. I think the next two movies lack a bit of the praise I gave to that early Nazgul scene, because Frodo is the focus, but also Frodo does have some plot armor moving on here. You know what I mean? Yeah,
okay,
there are scenes to flirt with getting caught, with handing over the ring, with just the whole thing falling apart because of Frodo's actions. But there's also a certain invulnerability he has as the main character, where that was not the feeling I was getting from that first scene. And maybe that kind of illustrates why I can call that my favorite of the trilogy, in the stakes of it.
That makes sense, yeah, because the problem is the story is bound to. I mean, the closer they get to Mordor, I wasn't just going to say Mordor. The closer they get to Mordor, it just weighs on him more and more and more. There's no doubt, though, that he becomes more frustrating.
Yes.
It's almost like dealing like a child. It's just who's decreasing in age kind of deal.
Absolutely.
It definitely makes sense. How do you feel about Elijah Wood still?
I think he's all right. I think it actually does a little bit of a flip-flop for Return of the King, that I enjoy his performance itself of the character.
Sure. Okay.
It's kind of odd to say so much that the character is separate from performance with this, but I just think that the roles are so big.
It makes sense, yeah.
I think he's all right. This is where also the real Frodo-Sam love affair starts, and also where Sam kind of becomes the real hero of the story as well. I mean, that's really the hot take, that Frodo isn't the hero. It's Sam that's the hero here. But I would say, kind of a joke, kind of not a joke. Watching this in 2022, Tom, I would say Sam and Frodo are gay icons.
They are not. Here we go.
No. I would say,
I'm surprised you said it starts here. Not with Sam's just ultimate protection from the get-go.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, absolutely.
He brings him in. Obviously, the Tolkien perspective on this is that it's the truest form of friendship. It's almost like friendship as a virtue here, which I can appreciate. But if I have to hear one more Sam, Sam, I'm gonna lose it. It's in Two Towers specifically that it's so sappy and
that's very good.
Oh, Sam, I miss this Shire. But yeah, half joke, half not. It's part of how much emphasis is put on their friendship, and sometimes I can look at that and I can say, wow, this is a higher form, a friendship as virtue that like Tolkien probably was writing about very directly in the book, but also in film form, it comes off a little bit silly sometimes.
Sure,
okay. What I mean? The main positive here is, new to the series are large-scale battles. I am, of course, talking about the final battle sequence of Helm's Deep, and it is nearly 50 minutes of war carnage, and boy, let me tell you, it is fantastic. It is fantastic.
Yeah.
This is probably what you're saying. It's ridiculous for me to say a scene under a log with a Nazgul is my favorite when Helm's Deep exists,
I don't know if Helm's Deep is my favorite. I'm not saying it's legit the best,
okay.
But yeah.
Okay.
It's a big difference. There's a lot of scenes in there between
yeah.
Logan and Helm's Deep, though. Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
But I would say possibly really, top 3 action sequences for the entire trilogy. It is the right mix of scale and attrition between forces. There's also such a great communication and setup of Helm's Deep as a battle location. I think this goes back to a lot of the praise that I was talking about with Predator, and that action is best when we understand every aspect of it and we see the interaction happen through action specifically. We understand so much about the location of Helm's Deep, whether it's just the quick info dump right when we're there or even kind of building throughout the film. I could imagine maybe this is even more in the extended cut, that we get more information about it. But it's something that I can't tell you how nice it is and how enjoyable it is to have this action sequence really play out and really evolve and develop, and again, this kind of attrition between forces, all of it play out because of the particular aspects of Helm's Deep specifically. It's something that I can't say about Minas Tirith in the third film, because there are other reasons why the battle changes and evolves and maybe goes bad at parts and maybe goes good in parts.
Oh, that's interesting.
Helm's Deep, it's all about the particulars of Helm's Deep, of why it's going good or bad.
Excellent way to point that out. Yeah, very true, very true.
And I think that's it's such a standout, and to have that as the entry of these big, large scale battle sequences, it
is crazy. Yeah, I would love to know. I mean, that would be a special on its own. Mm-hmm. Best battles or battle sequence in film, kind of. I mean, this is up there. This has to be top 5.
It has to be.
I don't know if I don't know if Braveheart would be in there or something like that. But just like you said, it's long.
Yeah.
It's long.
And it goes back to what you always talk about. It's in the right time that the CGI isn't going to be taking it really right place, right time, because it has all the scale that you would see in a larger scale, modern release of a war film or war fantasy.
Right.
But it has the impact of, there's a lot of orcs and Uruk-hai in armor. It's dudes in suits, you know what I mean? It's messy. They're in the mud. It looks hard to film. It was very practically.
I forget exactly. The filming was months on this.
Yeah,
months just for this scene, basically. Mm-hmm. But a lot of shooting in rain, or just or even if it's fake rain. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
studio rain. It was unbelievable. But all the extras were in. Everyone was about it. You know what I mean? The extras started doing their own chants at times, the
great.
Uruk-hai and everything like that. It was totally its own. It was a film within a film on itself, and shooting it. Big time.
And for that reason alone, I mean, this film really still, again, hits such a benchmark for me. I would say, again, don't let some of my criticism and some of my jokes about the characters take away from this. I mean, this last 50 minutes is really a sight to behold, and I think it's a great experience for that reason alone. And even though this may be the awkward middle child, is by no means a bad movie. I think a lot of this comes down to where this movie, again, has more pronounced elements of what I think doesn't work with any of these, or what I maybe don't care for as a reviewer, but by no means is it something that you should skip in the watching of these or anything like that. With that said, we are going to go ahead and give Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, a 77.
Okay, 77. Big dip. I was hoping maybe we'd
crack 80s.
Yeah, but that's okay. That's all right.
As good as Helm's Deep is, I think again that is one party hitting gold and two parties hitting
I think the vast majority of the people would kind of feel that way about Two Towers as well. You kind of claimed that as the awkward middle child, which I think is very understandable.
Sure.
Do you know? So.
Do you know why you're wrong? No. And that's why it's in the extended cut.
Peter Jackson's favorite film of these 3 is Two Towers.
No way.
Peter Jackson's favorite scene comes from the Two Towers.
Really?
No, surprising, it's Helm's Deep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna say it wasn't Helm's Deep.
No, so Helm's Deep makes sense, but this is his favorite movie out of 3, which is it's
not Mortal Engines.
But it's just hilarious to me that this, out of the three, like, this speaks to him in a certain way.
Yeah.
Even as far as the story goes and everything like that. We'll get into the extended editions.
Sure.
This is now, this isn't a half an hour longer. This is about 45 minutes longer.
We're scaling up.
Of extra content. And again, it comes to the thing of just like, do you know what scenes are being cut? What is the fluidity of the film?
Sure.
First of all, seamless. And I mean seamless once again.
Sure.
Had the same thing.
Even with the bigger run.
Even with the bigger run. I'm sitting there, and I could probably pick out one scene. If you were truly knew nothing about this, a beginner or novice at anything Lord of the Rings, you stepped into this, and you had to be like, okay, what were the scenes that were cut? You might be able to guess one or two of them, sure. But you would never say, like, all right, they could have cut that. There's nothing ever like that. And in some of the ways, one of those in particular that's relatively long, you are so happy it's there. You get to see more of a character. You get to see more development of another character that totally deserves it. I mean, absolutely deserves it.
Sure.
You get more on Aragorn, which, again, I think there's things there that is like, why would you cut that? This is kind of awesome to know. This, again, because we're still world building.
Yeah.
World's so big, we can keep on building until the trilogy's over. And to get that much, such more information, and maybe it's not that much.
Sure.
It gets us a little bit closer to the character. It gets us a little idea what the hell is going on.
Yeah.
And I think that's makes a better film. Again, it's because the dialogue and the acting works. If you have more of it, I'm fine with.
And especially understanding where the trajectory for Aragorn as a character is with these films. I think that might be worth it alone right there. You know, I mean, more time with him.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, we do build on Merry and Pippin a little bit, which you would either like or hate. Maybe you would appreciate the extra scenes that are in there.
Maybe I needed more time with them to kind of get over that.
Well, you said they lacked the most importance, even though while having importance.
Yep.
And you know, I think some of that is answered.
It feels like they stumbled into importance, but
right.
you know,
you're a Saruman guy, you know, so we get more of Saruman and such in this. Sure. And so, this is another one. I understand it's 45 minutes extra content. It's a ridiculous amount of extra content, and yet almost with complete all of it, I would say yes. Watch this one and not the theatrical. 100% watch this and not the theatrical. I tend to agree with you that this is the weakest.
Sure.
I am not on the Peter Jackson train with that one. I'll tell you what, the Helm's Deep scene does definitely, it's so special.
What does the extended do for Helm's Deep? I mean, that's probably the hardest to spot. What's new?
Believe it or not a whole lot of extra on Helm's Deep.
Okay.
Because you had 50 minutes of it, and Peter Jackson knew what he had.
He knew what he was doing.
He knew
the effort, the pain.
Yeah, I mean, if there was anything really great at Helm's Deep left out, no, there's no such thing. Yeah. It's all pretty much there. You get a little bit more information about, Helm's Deep is its own beast, and I think we get a really good representation of it.
Yeah.
One of the things why I love also the extended is we just get to see a little bit more of Rohan.
Oh, sure.
I love Rohan. Some of my favorite characters are King Theoden and Éomer. We get to see more of them. We get a little bit more going on, and in my opinion, we have a beautiful scene that's cut.
Really?
Kind of like the first one, but even more so, I think, with this one.
It's been a trend with both of your comments that it's been scenes that have been maybe more beautiful. Is it visually or is it more poetic to the characters? What is, maybe elaborate on beautiful?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
A little bit of both. You know, and maybe, I don't know if my praise is too high there, but it's just kind of my feeling on it.
Sure.
You know, and the one especially, and again, because one of them's dealing with Theoden. I love King Theoden. I have King Theoden's sword. You know,
he does, folks.
So it's just anything more with Rohan.
Sure.
Is going to feel special to me a little bit, and this revolves around Theodred, Theoden's son, a little bit, and again, anything more, because we're introduced to Rohan in the second film, so anything more that we can get world building on that, I love. Just like in the first one, you want to see more of the Shire. I love seeing more of Rohan.
Sure.
All in all, again, like I said, I can understand that it's a bit of the weakest. Some of it seems is transitional, you know, especially with maybe some of the running scenes. It's just like, okay, we're doing this to get to somewhere else still.
Yeah.
I totally get it. I have to say, it's no question in my mind. I did think for a second, I was just like, what do I do? Do I get two laces? What, I mean,
you're running into the troubles of the nuance of only 2 shoes and 2 laces.
Exactly right. The two towers, very easily. This gets a full-on Tommy Two Shoes. Both laces
Look
tied.
at that.
No surprises here, folks.
we got a Lord of the Rings plant here. He said, "Yeah, I'll do the extended."
But yeah, that's my overall opinion here of it. I don't think I'm leaving too much stuff out.
No, I think that's great, and I love. I think I may be even reflecting on what you said with those transitional shots, and you're right. It does kind of add substance. It adds
scope and scale.
Yeah, exactly. Because they're not just like popping everywhere. I'd give flack to another film like that. If they were just popping around. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, because it would be a laziness, and I don't take it as lazy. Mm-hmm. I just take it as okay. We're in a story. This happens in a story. It needs to come across somehow.
Yep.
But it doesn't get over the fact that it is a bit transitional.
Sure.
I would not say not lazy. One other point that I'll just make real quick is the seriousness of these films.
Yes.
The unbelievable, because we're in high fantasy, and this grabs seriousness so much with the high fantasy. Mm-hmm. Game of Thrones would not really, I don't think, be something like it is if it wasn't for this.
Oh, sure.
Just the way it's shot, the way that what we're dealing with, and how it comes across on film is that they seem like real characters and real people, and it's silly because we have elves and dwarves and we have like wizards and everything like that. It shouldn't be serious. When you watch Harry Potter, you feel a certain way. Mm-hmm. And it feels whimsical and kiddish almost. You're watching it through kid eyes almost even.
Sure.
This you do not get. This has a certain realism to it that the Star Wars or the Harry Potter or the Hobbit especially, they just can't get. They can't grasp it.
And that goes back to what I was saying with, again, it's not only the most important time in these characters' lives, but these characters almost recognize that it is the most important time in their lives as well.
And it comes across beautifully through screen.
Exactly.
I think that's a great point to make. Now, with that, and with that 77 bin, we're going to move on to our last film here. This now came out in December of 2003. This is The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, The Big Boy.
The Big Boy.
What did we get with this film? How does this come to an end for you, and how do we enjoy it?
Yeah, so my rating for this film originally was for the extended edition, but my feelings really are the same across this. I was not walking away with anything different, and I'm not saying that in a bad way. If anything, I think it was kind of an identical cathartic conclusion to both of these films, and even though there's a lot more meat on the bones in that extended, this is not only the biggest film of the three, but then the extended is the biggest of the extended. I think it's really just more so kind of a personal choice, folks at home. If you are diving into that extended, and obviously, Tom, I hope to hear the same in your kind of analysis of it.
Yeah,
it feels like if you really have been loving your journey with the Fellowship so far, all of these characters, like every single one of these characters, that is your indicator to go extended for Return of the King. So, but ultimately, I was kind of walking away with identical feelings on it because.
So you didn't feel yourself missing it too much?
No, there was really just one area, and folks, this was the only area that we will very slightly dip into some semi-spoilers. But in extended, we actually see some of the aftermath of what happens to Saruman, a character in Two Towers, and I kind of wanted to pose it to you, Tom. Realistically, I was wondering, is this critical for us to kind of understand? I don't know.
Well, honestly, I feel about this how I feel about some of the other stuff that I brought up already. Which, why would you cut this out, or how could you? It would.
You're kind of an outrage of that.
Would be why this would be heartbreaking to leave this on the cutting room floor.
Sure.
And when it comes to follow up things on Isengard, I would feel absolutely.
Yeah.
And if I had to pick, I'd take all the extra scenes in all three movies. Is this the most important? Very potentially.
Yeah.
But I get this feeling about a few of them, I have to say.
Yeah.
But overall, follow up on Isengard, you want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
We just got done with Helm's Deep. Absolutely.
Especially the curiosity our characters would have. Especially the characters rolling up on Isengard.
Of course, yeah, definitely.
I was kind of saying, well, they're not interested. But yeah, that's the one aspect there. I would say, again, don't let some of my critiques, folks, take away from the universal praise that has happened throughout these films. But let's go ahead and start with getting some of that bloodletting out of the way. Merry and Pippin are just the worst. I am sorry.
Really?
Yeah, it just in this they just continue to be the worst. It is double the screen time because again the Fellowship is further split up. Merry falls into probably worse than Frodo in logic of the film and doesn't have the excuse of carrying the most powerful ring on his neck. Obviously, the character isn't rewarded, but in film, he is rewarded by being put front and center with leadership of Gondor. Something that we are wondering.
Pippin, you're just
talking about. Oh, that's Pippin.
Yep.
Okay,
that's fine.
This leadership of Gondor is something that we're wondering about for the entire trilogy. Why? Where is this massive force? What is going on with this? It's from the very first meeting when the Fellowship is coming together, and the fact that Pippin is put in front that way, and again, I'm not saying that it is rewarded, but in a film way, he's put into what we as the audience might be most curious about walking into this third film.
Sure,
it did not feel good for me. Merry is slightly better, putting us in the seat of a kind of a rookie during battle, but I would say it cheapens some of the big conflict in this finale with some of his plot armor. Sure, people around him are dying, but his scenes have a tendency to take away stakes in the biggest moments this trilogy has been building towards. And I just think back to that scene where they just happened to stumble upon him in Fellowship and be like, what if they just took the road earlier? What if we just did not deal with this?
That's very funny.
Yeah,
that's good.
So, but yeah, like I said, I mean, I think once again, these two characters have been the same for all three movies. What is more pronounced for me is that they get more and more screen time individually. In 2, they get their own segment with them being a duo, and now in 3, we are getting them each having their own individual segments on top of that. We're not getting that with Sam and Frodo. Some two hobbits that I care about infinitely more, and have infinitely more weight for the story. So I think that's, again, unfortunately, I don't mean to kick on the two actors, but I mean, to the point that I even forgot which one was which. But that's really just the low point for me, and I think I'm actually curious to see how, because now they are two individual kind of spotlights, how that plays into the extended when we go into those notes. Just how brisk jogging was last film's repeat shot. It's now characters looking up at someone and dying in their arms. It's like this, this teary-eyed. There's like 5+ scenes that we get the same type of, kind of cathartic last moments with our characters. And I bring it up just because it's a repeat scene, or it's shot like identically each time, but does not have the same note of being like a transitional or filler effect with the previous one. These moments were some of the best, not just because we get a powerful finale with a certain character or something like that, or this being the finale of the trilogy. Instead, it's just, I don't know, there's such a class. You can definitely feel Jackson has such a huge respect for the source material and maybe what these characters mean beyond what we've been shown on screen or beyond what we've been shown in extended cut. I think these scenes, though duplicate in nature, have a totally different tonal effect and kind of couldn't be farther from fat, or couldn't be farther from filler for it then. I would say huge praise goes to this film for the scale. It is so turned up to 11. Yeah. I mean, if there's a reason why...
It's big.
Even if you've hated the last two films and you're watching this trilogy, there's a reason to push to the third, and it's for the scale.
It is an epic among like two other epics, but it's just epic
it
of
is
an
epicer.
Epic. It's unbelievable.
Or epicist. It is... it is something else, and I mean really, just turned up to 11. There's a great simple moment, and I say simple just because it's amongst so much chaos and everything, that there's a great moment where Gandalf comes across 3 trolls in the middle of battle, and we as an audience know immediately what it took to take down down one troll in the first film. So there's just such a simple way to communicate that this is on a whole new level, even for our characters. And
so
once
true.
again, we get these wonderful close-up shots of Gandalf barely acting with his face, but acting his ass off. Yeah, exactly. And I think in little moments like that, it just has a beautiful way to communicate scale, to us, that it feels real for us as the audience.
It is a great point, because you even look at when you're looking over huge shots of Pelennor Fields, and you see just how many more bad guys there are.
Oh, yeah.
And again, because we saw Two Towers, it is that importance of it. It's
Yeah.
communicated just through these shots, basically. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And we're there to feel it with them.
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head. Some of the best amping up happens in the opposition. Folks, if you are like me and enjoy rooting for the bad guy, I mean, this is your movie. I mean, the armies of Mordor that have nearly tripled and on so many levels are electric as villains on screen. I'm talking about the design, just new forces, just being visual candy, the scale of
and can we just talk about how great the bad guys look in every single film?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
It's unreal how good all types of orcs and orcai, just everyone looks fantastic.
And once again, key that
fantastic.
They're men in suits. They're men in, and
But
certainly,
one of the main bad guys, the field leader of the bad guys in the third one, and just his goopy face.
Yeah, it's
just like
disgusting,
it's fantastic.
but looks amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome.
And again, I've been trying to dance around not comparing to The Hobbit, but you look at the orcs, and I guess they're not Urkai yet because that's Sauron's forces, but just the orcs that we see in Hobbit.
Oh, and how they're CGI'd and such.
And yeah, design wise, you could say, they just look at as interesting, and kind of tell a story in their design,
right?
But look garbage, and interacting with characters look
practicality
garbage.
and such.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So there's so much weight to having these being rubber suits, and holds up incredibly well. I would say again, it's this kind of scale that makes watching the whole series worth it. If you have, for some reason, not seen these films and have given this a shot, maybe even given an extended a shot, there is a reason to push through to this final film, because it really is such a good evidence to why this trilogy was filmed at the same time, why VFX was the common thread among Oscars and critical praise for it. And again, I think there's a huge payoff in the opposition of the forces of Mordor and the forces of Sauron in this for the finale of it. It really is stellar. So the last, I mean, I think it. I don't know. This is probably a rough estimate. I would say the last hour and 40 of runtime is now big action set piece. So it's nearly doubled, but it's what are you here for but big action? I say approximate just because it is broken up a lot more. There's a lot of juggling act in that action.
There's a lot going on, yeah.
Yeah. Minas Tirith is our main kind of set piece. Which is the home of the nation of Gondor. It is a visual feast. The design of Minas Tirith, it is gorgeous to look at, to see action brought to it, to see that war, that carnage brought to it is next level. I really do think it is wonderful. I think for my notes kind of critically towards this, I do think the action itself has kind of taken a slight step down. Sword action and fight choreography in particular feels, I don't want to say cheaper, but it feels a bit less oomph. It doesn't have as much as the kinetic aspect. I chalk it up to quantity over quality, and boy, is that quantity worth it. So I do think it is worth having this scale if we maybe get a little bit cheaper action to it. But particularly in some of Gandalf's fights, the entire segment, we follow Sam in Mordor, and then also Merry on the battlefield. Those are specific moments that I was saying, wow, there's I don't know. It did not feel like the sword action we saw in Two Towers.
They're two very different battles and differences in both. Mm-hmm. And I think you're right in that. And part of I think just what you can't get around is what needs to be taking place. It's like Jackson needs to move quick.
Yeah.
And just there's only so much you can do almost. Because we have to go inside Minas Tirith, then we have the fields, then we have these guys doing this over here. And these guys, it's just so much going on. Where with Helm's Deep, you could be a little bit more intimate with everybody, spend some more time with everyone and their weaponry and everything. You know what I mean?
The stakes of the fortress itself, the sandbox it kind of makes for itself.
It's awesome to see huge scale and large scale, which that is. You know, the third one is, but there's also downsides to this, and I think that's kind of what you're touching on, definitely.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, folks. I think the payoff here is huge.
It's unbelievable to see. I mean,
It falls into the same praise, almost in the same breath of this is amped up to 11, and that is enjoyable in itself. But I would say, these forces colliding for the final battle, I would have liked a little bit, and not that I was saying I wanted less scale to it, but I just would want... Or I guess it just I feel like it lacks some of the brilliance in design that Helm's Deep had.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Specifically in, what complicates and develops mid-battle, it isn't always tied to the battle itself or the battlegrounds, like Helm's Deep was, and like we commented before. There are different factors that complicate the battle, which are fine. If in another world, if this was carbon copy to Helm's Deep, I probably would have been criticizing it for wash and repeat.
Right.
But it does not feel as good.
It's funny because the bigness of it, what you really wanted was just actually more fighting, but between individuals.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. Less just single slashes down a foe, and more, wow, they're on the ropes, a little bit more.
Yep.
So, a huge important is put on Gondor's leadership to give us complexity, and I would say it's interesting. It's a very big factor here. It's tied to Pippin, so maybe a little bit of that. I got the blinders on, and I wasn't enjoying it as much. But I would say again, the complexity of how this big battle develops. I think tying it to more so what's going on in this big city, rather than a single fortress, and having the complexity of that fortress just being its structure and battle and the flow of battle. It's different. I really have a hard time comparing these two combat sequences because they're aiming for different things. One is, I guess they're both survival, but
they're both extremely similar and very different at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, it's just how it is.
Yeah, I have a problem saying, top battles in Middle Earth, even comparing these two,
Yeah.
some sort of internet lists or something like that, But yeah, I don't mean to focus so much on that, but it is an hour and 40 and change of the of the finale. So, it is in your face about it. There is, it's not the same. There's a lot of good to it, and there's a lot that I was missing. I wouldn't say it's bad or outwardly bad in any sort of way. It's just that I was missing something else. So, one of the, I would say the biggest bright side ever is Frodo is saved for me in this film.
Good, that's good.
Oh yeah, he both Elijah Wood's performance and the character, there is a certain depth that is created with his performance that the burden of the ring may haunt him beyond the story coming to a close, and I felt that was the right amount of mix-up that I needed for him acting illogical, him frustrating the story, him frustrating our path towards the goal in the story. And I cannot understate how important this was for me. Jokes about Sam being the hero aside, we really needed some depth to Frodo after this last movie. And I think there is a reality that sets in throughout this entire film that, this journey and the journey back may not be as easy, as cut and dry. The plans have almost never gone according to plan.
Right.
And we're now seeing the consequences of getting this far, and if we've gotten this far successfully or kind of stumbled into that, where is this going to kind of bite us in the ass with the character? And I just felt that depth, the ring's influence, for so much of the story so far, the ring's influence was just kind of frustrating us getting to the end goal with Frodo, but its dark consequences, the gravity of the ring is I mean, again, it is, there's a reason why Gandalf does not pick it up once. And we finally kind of get that reaped, we get a reward of seeing that, of like, really, what is this going to do to Frodo? And I think that was, man, I mean, it was so necessary for me to like this character and like, and like Elijah's performance. And I can't say enough. I mean, not only did I think it was passable and a turnabout from most of this trilogy so far, it was actually great.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah. Just that carrying of the ring goes from a frustration to part of his character progression. And I mean, I think from a writing perspective, at least for this film, again, I have not read the books themselves, but from a writing perspective, we go from the ring almost being an antagonist to Frodo to part of his arc. It is all progression then. It's not frustration anymore.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point to make, and I think I might not share all those feelings.
Sure.
I think a lot of viewers would, though.
Okay, good. We're gonna get some more hate on Frodo if you're into it, but that's about it. I mean, again, it's a little bit complicated, a little bit of a dance, staying away from spoilers. I mean, we probably came closest to spoilers we have ever come with kind of tackling this, but with these epics, there's just a lot to unpack. Again, I think for me, the focus is, you've gotten now 2 movies in. What is going to push you to this one? It is scale. It is the redeeming qualities of certain characters. And again, like with most things, certain things are getting pronounced, certain things are getting tied back, but still a wonderful movie and something I would certainly consider, worth the watch and a great experience to watch all the way through. We're going to go ahead and give The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, an 81.
Okay, an 81 just got up there. I love it though. 81, and really all these films. I mean, besides the 85, 77, still a really good movie.
Oh, absolutely.
81, a great movie, really. And of course, 85 is a must watch, one of the best things ever made movie.
Absolutely.
I love that, and I think your reasoning is all sound, and I appreciate they came around on Frodo, which is great.
Are you not rooting for Frodo? I'm very curious.
No, I'm on board with Frodo all the time.
Okay,
so with the extended edition, so obviously the longest one, we're dealing with 50 minutes. So we're going from 3 hours and 20 minutes, already an extremely long movie.
Yeah.
Like already an extremely long movie. To the the extended going to 4 hours and 11 minutes.
That's wild.
It's very interesting hearing you say, because we watched the extended together, and now you watching the theatrical, and you kind of have the same feeling coming across with it, with the same score, and really basically the same notes, I think, from both films, which is telling, I think. I do have to say, my least favorite film in all 3 movies comes in the extended version of the Return of the King.
Oh, really?
So my least favorite scene of all, well, it needs to be one of them, but it's in this one. It's in the extended. It's just, I don't like the way it's shot. This is the only scene, really, that when you're watching the film for the first time, you could be like, something about this feels off. It doesn't, from the scene before and the scene after. It's weird that I get why this is here, but it's weird. It's got a different feeling.
Okay.
It changes tone a little bit.
Okay.
It is my least favorite scene, and yet, what is being, the information that we're being given in this scene, still important.
Critical.
Still, not critical, but world building. It's not critical. I won't say it's critical, because it's told in another way in a different section of the film.
Okay. But you were still walking away with this feeling of just like, how could you cut this? Like the tragedy that you cut in this.
It wasn't a tragedy that this was cut.
Okay.
And that's what I'm saying about this scene.
Sure,
it wasn't a tragedy that this was cut. And there's I would say maybe even 2 more scenes that I feel that way.
Okay.
There's 2 scenes that it's like, one in particular where it's like, all right, we didn't quite need this. And yet I love them. Those other 2 I still like. I like that they're in the film.
Sure.
This other one, again, I like that it's in the film, but it does have that feeling to it. It has this feeling where maybe this isn't a generic thing. So it's interesting with this. It's 50 minutes of extra content. And in ways, there's things in there that for the first time I could say we don't necessarily need. And there's things in there that I'm absolutely, 2 things in particular, I'm like, okay, we should absolutely have these in here.
One of those being what I noted?
Absolutely being in here. I would think the audience would be helped by seeing some of Isengard. Right after coming from the Battle at Helm's Deep, I think seeing more of Isengard would be phenomenal. And there's something else that it's such a short scene that's kind of cut. It's really not that long. there's something about it and the character. And for also, as the movie goes forward, it just should be in there. Also a big part of the book, from my understanding.
Okay.
And it makes the next scene a little bit better. It intros the next scene a little bit better than what the theatrical film does. Again, I'm dancing around everything and names, so I'm sorry about that.
But no, worthwhile.
I really don't want to give away anything.
Yeah, and maybe that's the key of folks at home that have seen the trilogy but not seen extended. This is your juice for
and there's juice.
Through?
There's juice there to squeeze. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would say it's if you're just hanging on by the skin of your teeth and absolutely dreading, and if you're really dreading over 4 hours, I would say that, okay, you can get away with, go ahead, you know what? Go ahead and watch a theatrical.
Okay.
Go ahead. However, if you are really enjoying it, you're still enjoying this world, want to get as much as possible from the story and from the characters, hands down watch this. None of these are you shouldn't watch this, don't waste your time.
Right.
All of these is you should be watching it. I think with the first two, get rid of theatrical and you just go ahead and watch those completely.
Right.
Don't even make it an option. Watch them. With this, because of the length.
Sure.
And because I say there are a couple scenes in there. There's some that are pivotal, but there are a couple that aren't necessary. If you're liking the characters in this story, it becomes necessary practically.
I see.
So for me, I'm absolutely always going to go ahead for the, I'm going to opt for the 4 hour and 11 minute, almost always, I can assure you. But as a whole, even theatrical, non-theatrical, The Return of the King absolutely, hands down, gets 2 shoes, 2 laces.
2 laces.
Not even
Double
a question.
Knotted.
Just 2 quick notes here. Obviously,
Sure.
folks, we're running long. We don't really care. These are big films.
It's 3 movies.
The CGI in this one is even, like, they were filmed at the same time. There wasn't that much of reshoots or anything like that. And how much can Weta Workshop really, like, improve on their tech? How good does Gollum look in this one, even compared to Two Towers?
Yep.
Gollum Smeagol, I mean, they really, it looks
he evolves
fantastic.
from Fellowship. I mean, looks the worst, but we barely see him.
Of course,
I mean? But yeah, you're so right. And maybe it's a combination of just, again, visually darker landscapes, as they approach
I don't think
Mordor.
so.
But
he looks great. I mean,
Yeah.
it's stepped up noticeably. Merry and Pippin, I really, really quite like them.
Okay, all right.
The character I am frustrated with, especially in this film, is Gimli.
Oh, really?
Gimli
Wow.
progressively gets more and more and more into a joke character. The extendeds don't really help him with that either.
Oh, okay. There's more jokiness.
He becomes more of just the joke. And that's the thing. We're not joking with him. He's a joke. I don't appreciate that, what Jackson does with him. We're picking up on some more dwarvy stuff. Sure, I get it. I get the tropes of a dwarf. But with the dwarf that Gimli is, and kind of he is a high-ranking dwarf and such, I want a little bit... Spend some more time with a little bit of lore, or let's have a little bit of exposition so we can get a seriousness of him and him and his people and where we're coming through him.
Yeah.
I don't need the jokes with him. If we're getting more Gimli, which we do, give me serious Gimli.
Yeah.
Let me care about this entire other race that we don't really get to see anything else of.
It's so true. It's almost mind-boggling how missing the dwarves are, and then how in your face they are with the Hobbit.
Literally, I would make maybe 2 or 3 notes to Peter Jackson over the whole thing. This is one of them.
Yeah.
There's another scene kind of towards the end and towards the very, very end there's a 3-second scene, maybe, something like that. I would cut completely.
Okay. 3 seconds off of the
and then
4 hour 11.
Notably, there's something else that happens in this film as well.
Sure.
Something that fans of the books, it is their least favorite scene in all the movies.
Really?
That's heart-wrenching. And truly, I was listening to a podcast one time, and the guy was just like, he played it back, and he's just like, even 15 years later, it's one of the most, it's just like nails on a chalkboard for me. Like
because it's so wrong to the text, or
exactly.
Oh, okay.
To the text, story, and people.
Interesting.
And characters. Yeah.
That was the one thing I was wondering the entire trilogy watching this again. What is text? What is Jackson's writing team, and also, what are fans just flat out not cool with?
What fans are flat out not cool with, there might be a dozen or even 2 dozen things. How much they care about those things, there's definitely a handful, maybe half a dozen, where it's just like, and there's this one in particular in this movie that really, really agitates.
Really?
And I think rightfully
and
so.
towards
in
the
some
ending,
way.
too. Wow.
Yeah, a bit, yeah. Well, towards the ending with that 3-second scene, that's something with me that I think I cut. But actually, yes, at the same time.
Okay.
As far as I was introduced to Lord of the Rings through the movies.
Mm-hmm.
So when I go back and retroactively find out what should or should not be in there, it's not as impactful for me.
Sure.
Because I fell in love with the movies and the characters and even the actors that are in there.
Right.
It's a different experience.
Absolutely.
For the Tolkien fan, if I was a Tolkien fan going into this and I was a fan of the books first, of the content first, it's not that I would hate these movies. I would probably still be a relative fan. But I definitely would not. I don't think they would all be getting two laces tied.
Oh, wow.
On the end of it.
Okay, very interesting.
I think for sure, because there's enough done to it that I could understand being a true fan would agitate you to no end.
Well, that's very interesting to hear, though, because especially with the extended, you know what I mean?
But you know what? Yes, but that being said, you think about the real Tolkien fans, and so many of them do love this. The biggest Tolkien fan of them all hated this, hates Jackson for it, hates the films being
Who
made.
gave him that crown, though? Biggest Tolkien.
It's Christopher Tolkien, his son, who continued to
my bad, Chris.
who continued to publish almost as many books, gathering his father's materials and ending some stories and everything
and
like
he
that.
hated these.
Oh, very upset.
That's fascinating to me.
Very, very, very upset with them, and I can understand why, especially coming from someone with him who has the most knowledge of the content and dealing with it so much, just personally and physically touching it,
And what
everything
these
like
characters mean, and what their arcs are. Yeah, I can understand.
And he just passed away too, which is a shame.
Wow.
It's amazing. J.R.R. Tolkien was still coming out with books in I think 2017, but it was because of Christopher Tolkien still taking some of his father's works and compiling stuff, and actual, true, still fresh information to be coming out. He died in the 70s. I think he died in 73 or something like that. And it's still getting that content from that guy. It's unbelievable. It's like, Jimi Hendrix dies and you find these new songs that come out.
I was going to say, a lot of auteurs, a lot of artists, that's what they do, just to get all that content out there.
So a world that was already huge due to him and the appendices of the books and everything like that was still getting that much bigger from a direct source from his son with that information. It's incredible. It's incredible. But yeah, not a fan of it. But a lot of people who love the books still do love it. You know what I mean? Irritated by these things here or there. And again, there's one scene in here that I would just know. But that's I'm just summing up kind of everything there.
Sure.
Let me just come back. I love the Merry and Pippin thing, by the way.
Yeah.
I do like them in this film.
Okay.
I find them to be pivotal. I find them to be coming into their own finally.
That is true. The solo spotlight does let them at least have their own arc. They're not grouped together and have one arc.
Yeah, and I think getting that, like I said, if we stuck with, I like seeing more of the characters, and so often when I see more of the characters, I enjoy it more, I enjoy the world more, and I enjoy what's going on more. Again, I just wish we got it with Gimli.
Sure. And not just the same joke from Two Towers as counting kills with Legolas,
Yeah, exactly. Burping or farting or something like that. Again, give me something there. But no, I actually really enjoyed the Merry and Pippin. As far as the extended, we do get a little bit more, and we get something from Merry that I think, again, could it be cut? Sure. Do I want it to be cut? Absolutely not.
Okay.
But anyway, that's kind of me wrapping up on anything. Or do you have any outstanding questions or anything like that?
No. I mean, I think to do a deep dive into the story, to maybe ask some questions of what things mean in the Second Age, or maybe how certain people came to power. I think it'd be too much of a dive, and I would need to tie it back into spoilers. So I think, again, for me, it's specific to just, again, recognize that the visual effects are something that hold up. Something that I don't think, a naysayer of this film would say, oh, that's got to not hold up. Right. So,
and still to this day, like you said in the very beginning with casting,
Yep.
I just shed a light on it one more time, where it's just like, the dialogue, the writing of this film is fantastic. And when you have that, and then you have good casting, and the actors are acting great, which they pretty much all are, it's like, it's fantastic. It's unbelievable, because you kind of just, when you're watching it and you're like, this is great, look at the size and scope of this thing. It's just like, yeah, but very importantly, these actors are still good.
Oh, yeah.
Where we cover stuff in other things where it's like, this was ruined by this acting. Or this was ruined by this dialogue. This was ruined by this.
For sure.
You know what I mean? And it's just, you can't really talk that up enough.
Yeah.
So it's good that we just touch on it.
Yeah, and that though I kind of dug in a little bit more to the latter two films, understand, again, I cannot stress that the huge amount of praise is overlapping with all of these. You know what I mean? Actually, one thing I am curious about, not to extend an already long episode.
That's all right.
What would you say?
This is the extended version of the podcast.
That's great.
People are going to look at the podcast and be like, oh my God, this is too long. I'm not listening to this.
and then not watch the extended
Yeah.
cut. What would you say to someone who has gotten so deep into Extended Fellowship, Extended Two Towers, and maybe wants off the ride a little bit earlier? Would you think it would be acceptable to say, I'm doing normal theatrical of
Yeah, well, because of what I said prior, which was like, forget the theatrical version of Fellowship and Two Towers.
Yeah.
I would say if you watch it, some people are not good at watching films. Some people are just too fidgety
Sure,
and
yeah,
things like
absolutely.
that. Like I said,
And
I
4
I
hours
think
plus is a big ask.
You could get away with it, sure, just like you did. You came away with it, and I think the fact that your notes were the same, I think, is very telling.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
The fact that your score is the same, I think, is very telling.
Yeah.
So if you go ahead and do the extendeds of the first two and not the third one, I think you're crazy. I'm not necessarily angry at you. I might be angry at you, but
actually angry at them.
because of the length, I get it.
Sure.
As far as content, if you watch the first two extended, you watch this extended.
Right,
You watch
right.
this extended because it is the most enveloped you can be with these characters.
Yeah.
Watch it.
Because that was my curiosity watching this, because when we watched them a couple of years ago now, all the way through, theatrical, extended, I kind of wondered the inverse of that, extended, theatrical.
And I think you would like that better
Yeah.
than how we did it.
Interesting. Well, who knows? Follow up to the special, extended. All right.
Vin, thanks for stopping down and listening to these.
Thanks for the analysis, Tom. I'm glad we had a fan to talk about these things, because I think the intimidation for me was maybe not being a direct fan of this.
I love that you loved it.
Well,
from a kid, you were Star Wars boy.
Exactly.
And other people are Harry Potter kids.
Yep.
This is a whole different type of thing.
Yeah.
And
Star Wars boy, Harry Potter kids. What would be the Lord of the Rings?
Adults.
Says you.
Just its final tally, by the way. It's 11 hours and 22 minutes if you just want to go ahead and do the theatrical.
Longer than a work day.
Yeah, but start it at noon or end up at night. I mean, what? Well, no, don't start at noon. But you know what I mean. It could be a one-dayer.
Yeah.
But Vin, we thank you so much for taking the time to watch these and give scores. 3 big movies. Folks at home, we're going to run this down one more time. We have The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, with an 85%. The Two Towers with a 77%. And, of course, The Return of the King with an 81%. Folks, we thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Daily Ratings Podcast. Hey, if you enjoyed the podcast, if you would, could you give us a good rating or tell a friend about us? And if you're wondering if a film is worth a watch, or just like to see more movie ratings from Vince, be sure to stop by thedailyratings.com, where we have our ever-expanding catalog of films. Also, if you found value in the podcast or our site, could you become a producer and go to the donations tab on thedailyratings.com? You can donate whatever amount of value you feel you receive from us. We're looking to build this into something large and great, but also be independent from those corporate sponsors, so we greatly appreciate any support from you all. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time on the Daily Ratings Podcast.